Good day, everyone. Given, I think, a lot of people's disappointment with the anniversary announcement, as well as my own feelings towards Inazuma and the character teasers, I wanted to make a bit of a different video today, discussing what I think has improved with the game, and what I think will continue to improve with the game, and what won't. Now, in order to talk about what I think has improved in the game, we first have to, of course, go back to the past and see where the game started out. Going back even before that, however, to over a year before the game officially came out, the game originally seemed to be focused on a single-player open world with kind of endgame co-op dungeons. Now, to me, this sounded absolutely fantastic. But then, sometime later, I found out that it was a gacha game, a system in which I very much so do not like, for a variety of reasons. And so I decided to look up the company to see if it had made any other prior gacha games, which I found that it had, and tried to see what people seemed to think, just looking at some Reddit posts, about how MiHoYo handles gacha games. And from what I had read, it seemed like MiHoYo was a very fair company. Now, when talking about games and game companies, that is really all I ask for. I don't necessarily ask to be given, endless amounts of free things or so on and so forth. What I ask for is for the company to be fair. To whatever you spend in the game, you get a fair amount for whatever you're putting in. And then sometime later, we also found out that there was going to be a battle pass, and then this Welcome Moon, which seemed to be almost like a subscription service. And as someone who plays MMOs, this seemed like it would be very familiar, and how I thought I would end up supporting the game. However, upon release, and sometime after release, I realized this really wasn't the case. If we go and look at, say, the Battle Pass, the majority of the things in which it gives you are Mora, XP, and weapon enhancement experience. You also get a 4-star weapon, and then about a tenth of the way to soft pity. A 4-star weapon they're certainly very nice, but they're still 4-star weapons, and so the majority of what you're gaining here, really, are things to upgrade characters. But the thing is, unless you're spending a bunch of money into the game, you don't really get characters very often. I myself do not buy the Battle Pass, and yet have enough experience and quite a bit of Mora saved up, which I could use to level a decent amount of characters, artifacts, or weapons. And this is despite the fact that I am nowhere even remotely close to finishing the Bounty of the Earth achievement. So the Battle Pass, for the most part, is honestly pretty much pointless for me. Then we come to the Blessing of the Welcome Moon. And at first glance, it looks like a fantastic deal. I mean, it's certainly a lot more bang for your buck than anything else the game provides. You spend $5 and you get essentially 3,000 Primo Gems. Sounds amazing, right? But then I tried to think about it for just a second in terms of how long and how much money would this take in order for me to actually get a 5-star character. Well, over the course of 5 months and $25, you would get 1,500 Primo Gems, which is probably around enough to have you a very decent chance of getting a 5-star. However, when getting a 5-star, you have a 50-50 chance of getting the thing you want versus not. So if you lose, that means you have to spend another $25 and another 5 months of your life to get a single copy of a single character that you actually want. When thinking about it that way, it once again doesn't seem very fair. You spend nearly a year and the price of a AAA game to get one copy of one character. Now, a lot of people who play the game want more stuff. MiHoYo to give them more things for free. I think a lot of people were expecting the anniversary rewards to be very good, perhaps from experience from other gacha games. But personally, as someone who has no experience with other gacha games and only has experience with MiHoYo, I had thought that we would get the same sort of 10-ish wishes that we got from the New Year's event, with maybe there being, say, a discount on topping up. Now, instead of there being a price cut on the topping up, they're merely resetting the bonus. So honestly, this is even less than what I had imagined. But I think there's an important point to make here, that I think a lot of people are expecting MiHoYo to eventually sort of give more things. And from our experience with MiHoYo so far, I just don't see that being the case. They seem to be very comfortable in terms of what they are willing to give, as they don't really need to give anything else, because they're basically just banking on the people who are willing to spend, say $2,000 on every banner that comes out. And are willing to spend around $300 a month just to be able to use as much resin as you can. And so this is pretty much, I feel, my biggest issue with the game. It's not that they don't give us enough free things, or that I just hate gacha to begin with, which I mean, admittedly I do, but that there is no fair monetization system in the game where you can spend some money and get a decent amount of rewards. Once again, as someone who kind of comes from MMOs, usually in the large MMOs, you have perhaps a mandatory or not mandatory subscription every month, which costs you maybe $15. And then there's a cash shop, which you might have a $5 costume, or maybe you're a real high roller and you get that $25 multi-person mount or house. And so when you come instead to this game, where the subscription-like payment method gives you practically nothing, and the high rollers aren't spending $25 but spending $2,000, I cannot help but feel like it is frankly kind of an insane system. Even if the game has the options of spending, $2,000 a banner and spending $300 a month to get as much resin as possible, if there was some sort of subscription-like payment method that actually gave you a decent amount of stuff, I would feel very differently about the game. Because if those MMOs can deal with a $15 subscription and $5 to $25 items in the cash shop and survive, despite being notoriously expensive, I should think this game would be able to do quite well for itself if it had a similar system, but instead of spending $25, you're spending $2,000 for those high rollers. And I also think it could be healthier for the game itself. The game wouldn't be entirely dependent on the whales in order to sustain itself. And the main reason I am mentioning and bringing forward my thoughts on the monetization system is because I don't think MiHoYo is going to improve in this aspect. We can see, whether it be free Primogem-wise, they've made no real improvements. Monetization-wise, they haven't really added anything. And the only improvement really that they made to the banners is make it so that if you do not get the weapon you want twice on the weapon banner, the third time, now you'll get it. In other words, if you're willing to spend $400 into the banner, hey, we'll give you one copy of the weapon you wanted. Which to me, I guess is an improvement, but is an improvement that I still do not find even remotely reasonable. And so I would not go into the future expecting MiHoYo to improve the gacha system, to introduce better payment systems, because it has been a year and they just do not seem interested in doing so. They seem perfectly content with simply relying on people who are willing to spend thousands of dollars into every banner. And for anyone else, they're there. And so once again, I just wouldn't get your hopes up in this regard, as I feel you're just going to end up disappointed. And that way, at some point, if MiHoYo actually does improve something to do with the monetization system, then we can be pleasantly surprised. Now, with the monetization out of the way, we can dive a bit more into the game itself. Now, once again, as someone who, generally speaking, plays perhaps typical RPGs or MMOs, the amount of story in this game upon release, and even up till now, has been abysmally little. In terms of the sort of main story quests that we've had for the past near year at this point, you can count them on your hands. So honestly speaking, by the time this game gets through the entirety of all the different nations, something along the lines of 6 years or something down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if this game has no more story content than just a normal RPG. Now, I know a lot of people are going to basically say, oh, but we'll get more as time goes on. And that's true. But what, we're going to basically get 3 quests with maybe a little bit of a side quest with Dainsleif, for example, every year? An MMO upon release will probably have about as much story as this game will have once we reach its end, going at this rate. And then every year or so, they will pump out an expansion or something along those lines that has basically just as much story. In comparison, this game has had very little story, and honestly speaking, up until Inazuma, pretty boring as well, in my opinion. If we're talking about the actual quests themselves, the most interesting thing that really happened prior to Inazuma was the giant water god Ocial showing up. And the cutscenes for it were great, and the setup for it was also great. It really got you up and ready to fight this giant boss. And so you're there, you're present, the Adepti are shooting lasers at it, and you fight some Fatui, that you've been fighting for a month and a half already. and then there's a cutscene and it's over. In the RPGs in which I'm more accustomed to playing, we would fight the OCL, not be a complete bystander. And that is kind of something which I do feel is a bit disappointing, is the Traveler in a lot of the story feels like a bystander to a not particularly interesting story. And what really kind of made me start thinking about this was the Raiden trailer that was recently released. And that I recently-ish started reading the descriptions of the artifacts, which I probably should have done long ago, but I'm lazy. And seeing and reading these things, these events which happened in the past, just kind of makes me think about how more interesting this game would have been if it wasn't set now, but instead 500 years ago. Wouldn't it have been a lot more interesting to help Raiden fight against a giant serpent boss? To be there while Raiden has to kill her friend who has gone mad? And as well as that adorable image of all the forest folk rallying behind Raiden to deal with the miasma, with the not-so-adorable realization of her final friend in that trailer being corrupted and lost to the darkness. And then, of course, reading the artifact sets and seeing all the Zhongli trailers and so on and so forth about the past as well, really just makes it feel like the game at the present time is just not very interesting. And yet 500 years ago, it could have been very interesting. Now, with that having been said, I do think the game, in terms of story, more in terms of the world quests, is moving in a better direction. The world quests before Inazuma, frankly, were a complete snooze. You basically just did them to get them out of the way. Whereas a lot of the world quests in Inazuma are significantly more interesting, some very dark and upsetting, and makes you question whether Raiden, the Conro Commission, or the Resistance actually care about the people of Inazuma, when you see the horrors that have occurred to the people of Yashiori Island, and how no one has done anything about it. But getting into the specifics of that, of course, would make this video far too long. I just wanted to bring this up, as I do think that the world quests are moving in a much better direction, with the story quests seeming to improve a little bit. But if we continue at this pace, there is still just unfortunately going to be very little of it. And the majority of story in which we're going to be obtaining is pretty much just through reading books or artifact sets about the past, which we are not present for. Now, this bit in terms of the story, I think kind of actually has come across a bit more negative than I intended, because while I do feel the story in this game is not fantastic, it is moving in a better direction. Before we move on from the story, however, there is one more kind of negative thing that I don't really think MiHoYo can really do anything about, honestly, with this type of game: the characters in the world. If you go and look at MMOs, like let's say Final Fantasy XIV, over the course of the years in which this game has been out, you've witnessed the triumphs, despair, and growth that the people in the world experience, because the people in the world remain, unless of course they die. This is a game where the characters are present for 1, 2, 3, maybe quests, and then aside from some, hey look, there's an event, come have fun, they pretty much aren't present again. And so we do not get to grow with these characters at all. And so the only characters we could experience growth from are Paimon and the Traveler, neither of which really seem to change much. And this isn't necessarily meant to say be something that is wrong with the game at all. It's more so just when you think about the games in which you have spent perhaps years on and you grow to hate or love, maybe even hating a character until years later in which you actually really like them now, and you almost sort of form bonds with these characters over the course of this game in which you've been playing for years. I don't really feel like that's particularly something that will happen in this game, because as I said, they're there for like 2 quests maybe. And after that, they're just sort of units to use in battle. And so thinking that, it does just feel a little bit sad. Now, moving on from that and into the exploration open world has seen pretty much nothing but improvements. You know, we now have the little boat, so we have a little bit of a different way of traversing. The zones themselves, the islands look far better than the honestly kind of bland Mondstadt and Liyue. And we actually have some puzzles now. Because let's be honest, lighting up 4 braziers in no particular order isn't exactly a puzzle. So the exploration, for me at least, has been significantly improved with Inazuma. As the world now looks very nice, we actually have some fun puzzles that you might have to awaken a few brain cells to do, and has me looking very much so forward to the future and to see what they will do with the remaining nations and how they will continue to improve. Another thing in which I feel is an improvement but has perhaps gone a little bit unnoticed are character animations. And you can kind of see this Ayaka as she's actually a very old character. The character animations are a little bit wooden. They don't have all that much movement to them. Hydro characters, you know, kind of just swing their arm around. Sword characters kind of just swing their sword. And maybe they have a cool little slashy thing, but they don't really do much particularly interesting. Bow characters kind of just shoot their bow. Nothing particularly interesting there either. But looking upon Yoimiya, who has a drastically more interesting animation to her normal attack string. Looking at Kokomi, where she seems to essentially swim through the air as she attacks, instead of just slapping the air. As well as Raiden's moveset, her eye, and the slashing through space that she seems to do during her ultimate. I do think the character animations are improving, and so is yet again something to look forward into the future to see how they continue to improve. Now, a short side note here. With Yoimiya and Raiden and Kokomi have not yet released. However, while I do think they'll be perfectly good characters, I don't think they'll be of the level of some of the great characters we've had thus far. Say Venti, Zhongli, or Ganyu. And this is also true with Yoimiya. So it might be possible that miHoYo is kind of trying to rein back the characters' power levels so that they don't necessarily feel like they have to constantly release a Ganyu. Now, this being good or bad, I think is pretty much just up to opinion. As if they constantly released Ganyus, I don't think that's particularly an issue. As if you're just releasing characters that are as strong as a strong character from before, it's not like everybody else in the game becomes useless. It's only once you start looking at, oh, Ganyu, and then it's like, okay, so the next character is going to be even more powerful than Ganyu. Oh, and the next character is going to be even more powerful than that character, where you kind of start to have an issue. Now, another thing I have to say I was rather disappointed with, getting back to how starting the game, I had thought that it was going to be a kind of open world experience with co-op dungeons, and finding that the only endgame dungeon is not co-op, I was a little bit disappointed, but I assumed that more things would come out with time. As the updates came by and nothing was added with regards to that, I pretty much just looked towards Inazuma 2.0 to see if there would ever be an inclusion to the endgame, or if we were pretty much just going to have the Spiral Abyss as our only endgame content to grind for, and the co-op, both open world and for anything else, is pretty much just there and has no real purpose or meaning. And as Inazuma has come out, and there's been nothing added co-op-wise nor endgame-wise, I do have to say I find that a little bit disappointing. And I don't think that's going to be changing. However, that's just pure speculation. Who knows? Maybe in 2.2, they will open up the chasm, and the evil that spewed forth from 500 years ago shall spew forth once more, and this shall be an addition to the endgame content, to Gear and Theorycraft 4. But as it has essentially been a year since the game has come out, and we've had nothing yet, I don't really hold that much hope. Now, one issue leading up to Inazuma that people kind of had with the game is that there really wasn't much content that was introduced. You have some event that for the most part you kind of just do because you want the free Primogems and so on. It's gone after about a week, and then you sort of wait till the next update. And that was pretty much our lot. With Inazuma, we have a new area to explore and all sorts of new stuff to do, and then with 2.1, we shall get the remaining half of that. But beyond that, there's a very real possibility that we will return to the same rut that we were in leading up to Inazuma. Now, of course, it'd be nice if miHoYo is able to churn out more content than they were before. However, I feel like that might be a little bit unreasonable to assume, as I imagine they were probably working on Inazuma even before the game actually came out. Whereas now, I'm not sure how much beyond Inazuma they've actually managed to get to. So this is something else that I just kind of wanted to mention to perhaps try to avoid being disappointed by simply preparing yourself that this may be kind of just what we're going to get. Maybe 1 or 2 Dragon Spine-like zones in between each 10-month or yearly nation update, and then that's kind of it. And with that, I think we reached the end of the video. Now, honestly, I do think it kind of ended up being a little bit more negative, perhaps, than I had originally intended. But I think the issue is that while the improvements are good, the things which still plague the game are still quite bad. Personally, I am definitely looking forward to the future, as the characters themselves at the very least, their animations and so on seem to be improving even significantly. I am excited to see what characters are going to be coming out. But even in there, a little bit disappointed, as after seeing the Raiden trailer, and the Great Tengu, and the Oni Swordswoman Chio, once again just really makes me wish that it was 500 years ago instead, because how cool would it have been to have those characters as playable options. Now before we just completely wrap up, I would like to ask you guys a quick question regarding the artifact descriptions and the books and so on and so forth that are in the game. Personally, I've been kind of too lazy, or just felt like I should do something else, to really read them until more recently-ish. And so I was wondering, for anybody who perhaps feels that same way, would you like a few videos of me just reading those descriptions out loud so that you could perhaps play them in the background while doing something else and don't have to read them for yourselves, but still get the lore and so on and so forth that they contain? And if so, which would you prefer? Would you like me to go through, say, the artifact descriptions first? Would you like me to go through the books in the archive and then perhaps in the quest menu? I would like to know your thoughts on that, so if you wouldn't mind, please do let me know. And also, how do you think the game has changed or improved? Are you perfectly fine with the state it's in? Do you find it improvements in certain areas, but disappointing that it hasn't improved in others? Do you want a better payment method? And how do you think the future of Genshin Impact is looking, what it will improve upon, and what will not change? Do let me know down below in the comments. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you all again next time, and hope you all have a great day.